And so I built this anchor, and I'm looking at this first pitch, and this first pitch was something that was the most I was most worried about because it is the free climbing pitch of the route. And on lead rope solo, I've kind of found kind of a huge baby when it comes to free climbing on rope solo. I'm like a fairly reasonably strong free climber. I've climbed 12A before. I'm not weak, but it's the mental aspect, even if it's like 5'6", 5'7" on lead rope solo, really freaks me out. And the topo of this route described the start of the first pitch as 5'7", sporty, no pro. And I'm like, all right, so it's maybe going to be like a free solo. And I get to the first pitch, and I am kind of questioning the topo a little bit because I see that from the ground, there's like a seam there that presumably will take like some level of trad gear. And I am like, all right, I would rather not free climb if I have the option to. I'm much more comfortable just like standing in aiders and being able to like, fully contemplate everything, move really, really slow. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to put my approach shoes on and get my aiders, and I'm going to aid climb this seam instead of doing the first pitch. Because the first pitch, the topo says 5'7". I don't know. Maybe some holes had broken off or stuff like that, but it looked a little bit harder, at least like less obvious than a 5'7" would be. So I decided to A climb this. And I start A climbing. I get like one good cam in. I think it was like a number 3. And then the seam like really tampers down, and I'm into this like hard aid. And I don't know how I managed to turn like 5'7" free climbing into like C2 or C3 aid climbing. My like next piece was like a really crappy offset cam that held body weight, but it was a very weird placement where I couldn't get a tri-cam to stick. I couldn't get like a totem cam to stick. I had to use like the biggest offset cam they make in this like, I don't know, like little like bowl feature. And that was the only thing I could get to stick there. But that thing held body weight. And at this point, I'm maybe like 8 feet off the ground at this point. I really haven't gone very far. I placed 2 pieces, and with 8 climbing, yeah, each piece only gets you like a couple feet of vertical. And so then I get to place my next piece after this offset cam, which is really crappy. And the seam like really tampers down, becomes like more of a uniform crack. So I'm like not really worried at this point. I already feel like I've done the aid crux with this crappy offset cam. And I see this like thin seam, and I like take a 0.1 Z4 Camelot, which is like the second smallest cam that Black Diamond makes. And I stick it in this seam, and I don't really, one mistake I made is I didn't really like bounce test it that well. I kind of like stamped the aider on it and like yanked it around. But I thought it was like, oh, this is like a parallel seam. This is probably correct. And I step on it and weight it, and it holds for about 1 second, and then immediately it blows. And then, of course, that offset right below it, yeah, the body weight only piece immediately blows as well, and I take a fall. And I'm about, I want to say like 10 feet up. It's a little hard, I didn't get the ruler out or anything like that, but I would say I'm about like 10 feet up, and I take a ground fall. The next cam, with 2 cams out, the next cam is not really enough to stop me from hitting the ground. I hit the ground. I land like kind of on my heels, and then tilt backwards, and then finally like my like self belay system from the rope soloing engages as basically, I'm kind of like falling backwards, and my head and back are like a few inches off the ground. I'm kind of like, lying backwards. And I get a little freaked out. And I kind of like pull myself up, and I realize that my like heel hurts quite a bit. And it's not like a crazy amount of hurt. It didn't really feel like I'd like, shattered my calcaneus or whatever. I didn't feel like I'd really like broken anything. My heel like hurt quite a bit. And if that was the end of the story, what I should have done here is I should have like packed everything up and left, and gotten that checked out like an urgent care. But for some very strange reason, I like kind of sat there for a bit with my cams and my hurting foot, And I realized, like, I was like kind of checking it out, examining myself, and I realized, it was kind of just my heel that hurt. And, I could still like kind of like toe onto the wall and like stand on, the little holds at the base of the climb with like no problem whatsoever. For some reason, I managed to convince myself that my heel hurting is just not that bad, and I should continue on this climb.
Well, what was the
Um,
reason though? Like for some reason, you said that twice now, for some reason, but like what was the reason?
I have some theories as to why I felt that way. I think, and I kind of, this is something that I've grappled with, is like why I continued on this climb for a while. Because I think, if I had been with a partner and I'd been the belayer and I saw my climber just fall and hit the ground and then like complain about their foot hurting, I would like, I'd be like saying, "We're going now. I'm driving you to urgent care." I'd be helping them hobble back to the car. But for some reason, when I was with myself, the little voice in the back of my head that tells you not to do stupid things was just asleep at the wheel. And I was like, I can just go along. I think maybe there was no one to tell me to back down, and I wanted to do it. I'll talk more about my mindset as well later.
But I just want to stop right there because like yeah, like you would have done, and like I just want to say this and then you can continue. But like, and I asked this to myself a lot too. Like I I would have treated somebody else a certain way, but I wouldn't have treated myself that same way. Like I'll go buy my friend flowers who's having a really difficult time, but I would not buy myself flowers because I'm going through a really difficult time. Like why do we treat other people better than we treat ourselves? And you don't have to answer that right now. I just think about that a lot myself, so I want you to think about that too because you didn't do that for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And the question is why?
Yeah, I think this climb was something that I kind of wanted to do, and I think I had this image, and I wanted to talk about later about the mindset of soloing. But coming into this, I had this like image of myself as I'm a good climber. I'm good at rope soloing. I have mastery of like these technical systems, and I think backing off would kind of shatter that self image. And I think that's a big reason of why I went back on there, is because I would shatter this image of myself. And it took me a while to realize that that image of myself was not necessarily accurate. And it was empirically proven that day. I clearly, many other things went wrong this day, but as I will get to eventually. But it was empirically proven that I wasn't truly a super skilled climber in this scenario. I was in over my head, and confronting that required me to be like really uncomfortably honest with myself. And that's kind of the end of like the story. And it has always just kind of stuck out to me that sure, the injury is like the least exciting part of that, but the psychology and the fact that I went back up there after injuring myself, and I didn't really have like a plan for how I was like not going to get injured, like how I was not going to fall off again, has really like stuck with me, and like that, like the psychological aspects of it